On the evening of October 17, 2003, police discovered the body of a young man in a house on the quiet outskirts of Minnesota, showing signs of strangulation and struggle. The room was covered in blood, handprints were on the wall, and dried semen stains were on the boy's back. A torn photograph of the two brothers as children lay on the floor. The Holden family lived in a small suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota. Their parents, Arthur and Julia Holden, owned an auto repair shop and were well respected in the local community. The family had two sons, an older son, James, and a younger son, Kevin. While the two boys were similar in appearance, their personalities were different. James was reserved and quiet, while Kevin was more outgoing, sociable, and popular among his peers. As children, the brothers spent a lot of time together, often helping their parents with chores and playing in the yard. However, with the onset of adolescence, the first disagreements emerged between them. James began to withdraw from his family, spending a lot of time on the computer, preferring solitude. Kevin, on the other hand, was an active participant in sports clubs and found common ground with many people at school. Neighbors noted that the Holdens were an outwardly ordinary, respectable family, raising no suspicions. However, within the home, tension often reigned. Arthur was strict and demanding of his sons, while Julia suffered from anxiety and controlled their every move. Their upbringing took place under constant pressure, which gradually took a toll on both brothers' psyches. James's behavior attracted particular attention after entering high school. Teachers noted his apathy, frequent absences from classes, isolation, and tendency to withdraw. Kevin, on the other hand, excelled in sports and was friendly, but he became irritable around family and often clashed with his mother. Over the years, the relationship between the brothers became increasingly strained. Some close friends believe this was due to Kevin's jealousy of his older brother, who felt his parents were paying more attention to James because of his difficulties. On the other hand, James felt guilty and became increasingly withdrawn, leading to further conflicts. Those around them were particularly concerned that the brothers were increasingly left alone together. Their parents worked late, and the house was filled with silence in the evenings. It was during this period, according to the investigation, that strange forms of communication, uncharacteristic of a normal family, began to emerge between the brothers. Later, experts would point to psychological preconditions for the brothers' dependence on each other, bordering on friendship and obsessive attachment. According to neighbors, in the spring of 2002, James and Kevin began frequently taking walks together through the neighborhood, engaging in long conversations alone. Sometimes they would disappear for several hours, returning home late in the evening. Neither had close friends outside the family, and their parents' attempts to establish social relationships with others were unsuccessful. By early 2003, tensions in the Holden household had reached a fever pitch. Concerned about her son's behavior, Julia repeatedly consulted a school psychologist, but he failed to notice anything out of the ordinary. Kevin himself became even more irritable, and James almost completely stopped speaking to his parents. Family dinners were silent, and Arthur's attempts to mend the relationship ended in arguments. As summer approached, James and Kevin increasingly left home together. According to neighbors, they sometimes returned with dirty clothes, bruises, or scratches. The brothers responded evasively to their parents' questions, which raised further suspicions. Later, the investigation would establish that it was during this period that the brothers developed a special, secret relationship, unsuspected by any adults. The investigation established that the unusual closeness between the Holden brothers began to develop several years before the tragedy. According to investigators, in late 2001, James and Kevin began spending increasingly more time together, almost completely excluding other acquaintances. From correspondence and diaries later found in James's room, it was possible to reconstruct the chronology of events that led to the brothers' boundary violation. In December 2001, after yet another conflict with their parents, Kevin and James locked themselves in their older brother's room. According to Kevin's recollections, recorded during the investigation that evening, they had their first serious conversation about their experiences, fears, and isolation. The conversation was accompanied by bouts of crying and hugs, which, according to Kevin, for the first time took on a different, more intimate character. In the spring of 2002, the relationship between the brothers took a more intimate turn. In April, when their parents went away for the weekend, James and Kevin were alone at home. According to the case file, they had their first sexual encounter that night. Kevin, being younger, was afraid and confused, but he gave in to his older brother's persistence. According to Kevin's testimony, James initiated the affair, explaining that this was the only way to feel true closeness and support. During the investigation, it was established that the brothers tried to hide their intimate relationship from others. They met late at night after their parents were already asleep, or would retreat to the basement of the house. Their behavior became increasingly withdrawn, and their contact with the outside world was minimal. During school, both were absent-minded, sometimes arriving sleep-deprived, which was noticed by teachers. Psychological evaluations conducted after the crime revealed a codependent relationship that only intensified over time. James's diary contains numerous entries about fear of exposure, feelings of guilt and shame, and the inability to let go of his relationship with his brother. Kevin's correspondence with his only school friend reveals intense anxiety and a desire to return to normal life, but each attempt to distance himself ended in breakdowns and renewed intimacy. The brothers developed a series of rituals and cues to determine when they could be alone together. This usually happened at night after family dinner. Kevin would lock the door, turn off the light, and only then would James approach. Sometimes they would spend hours together, oblivious to the passage of time. Occasionally, arguments would erupt during these encounters, fueled by jealousy, reproaches, and fears of being discovered. In May 2002, Kevin's mother, Julia, noticed bite marks on his neck. When questioned, her son claimed he'd gotten into a fight with his classmates, but it later emerged there had been no such conflict. A month later, his parents found the remains of contraceptive packaging in the trash, but assumed they were from a personal relationship James hadn't disclosed. In the summer of 2002, the brothers became even more cautious. According to the case file, they virtually stopped attending family events and rarely left the house. Kevin began to refuse sports activities, and James stopped going to the store. In private messages, they discussed running away or living independently, but this was financially impossible. In August 2002, the brothers had their first serious conflict. It stemmed from Kevin's attempt to start a relationship with a classmate. James perceived this as a betrayal, then threw a tantrum and threatened to tell his parents about his secret. As a result, Kevin broke up with the girl, after which the brothers' relationship became even more dependent and withdrawn. In the fall of 2002, the situation worsened. Kevin began having anxiety attacks, sleeping poorly, and complaining of constant tension. James, according to experts, showed signs of paranoia, fearing surveillance, and the installation of wiretaps in the house. Both increasingly wrote down their thoughts in diaries, which included themes of fear of exposure, a desire to start over, and thoughts of suicide. In early 2003, the brothers completely withdrew into their own circle, isolating themselves from the outside world. According to investigators, their relationship no longer resembled normal brotherly intimacy and took on the character of a pathological dependency, accompanied by psychological and physical abuse. According to investigators, an incident occurred in the Holden home on October 17, 2003, ending in tragedy. The chronology of events that day was reconstructed based on witness testimony, forensic examinations, and an analysis of telephone and email correspondence. Both brothers and their mother, Julia Holden, were in the house that morning. Their father, Arthur, left for work at an auto repair shop around 7 in the morning. Julia was busy with household chores and, according to her, didn't notice anything unusual in her son's behavior. Both brothers woke up late, ate breakfast in silence, and barely spoke to each other. Kevin looked tired and nervous, and James avoided eye contact. After breakfast, Kevin retired to his room, where he texted a former classmate. In his messages, he complained of constant tension and the lack of a way out of the situation. James, meanwhile, remained in the living room, looking through old family photos and listening to music on headphones. Around noon, the brothers encountered each other in the kitchen and had a brief argument over computer use. The argument quickly escalated into a heated argument, with voices raising. Julia intervened, demanding a cease and desist. The two brothers went to separate rooms. A few minutes later, Kevin approached his brother to apologize. At that moment, according to Kevin, They engaged in a frank conversation about the future, possible changes, and the fear of being discovered. James expressed doubts about their relationship and suggested they stop contacting each other. Kevin, on the contrary, insisted on maintaining contact. The atmosphere in the house remained tense throughout the day. Around 4 p.m., the parents left on business, leaving their sons alone. This circumstance, according to investigators, was decisive for subsequent events. According to the forensic examination, the tragedy occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. During this period, the brothers found themselves alone again. According to Kevin, they discussed the future of their relationship, but the conversation quickly devolved into accusations and mutual recriminations. James declared that he could no longer live in constant fear and was going to tell his parents everything. Kevin perceived this as a threat and tried to stop him. A struggle ensued, accompanied by shouting and attempts to restrain each other. An autopsy revealed that a fight had occurred in the room where the brothers were. Blood stains on the floor and walls, as well as numerous bruises on James's body, indicated physical resistance. At some point, Kevin resorted to strangulation. According to the medical examiner, this was the primary cause of James's death. After James's breathing stopped, clinical death occurred within minutes. After the attack, Kevin remained near his brother's body for some time. He later admitted to being in shock and not fully comprehending what had happened. He attempted to tidy up the room, clearing away scattered items and wiping bloodstains from the furniture and floor. Handprints remained on the wall, and a torn photograph of the brothers as children lay on the floor. Investigators believe the photograph ended up on the floor during a struggle. For the next hour, Kevin was in a state of stress, unsure what to do next. He tried calling his mother, but couldn't explain the situation. Finally, around 7 p.m., Kevin called 911 and reported the incident. Without providing any details, operators recorded severe agitation and slurred speech. Police and an ambulance crew quickly arrived at the scene. By the time they arrived, James was already dead. Kevin was in a state of nervous breakdown, unable to respond effectively to questions, and his condition required psychiatric intervention. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected in the room where the crime occurred: traces of blood, scraps of clothing, both brothers' cell phones, and personal diaries. The investigation began immediately. The house was cordoned off, and parents, neighbors, and classmates were interviewed. Based on the evidence gathered, investigators quickly concluded that the death was violent. Within the first 24 hours, preliminary autopsy results were received, confirming the cause of death as asphyxia due to suffocation. Police began reviewing the brothers' personal records and email correspondence, which allowed them to clarify the timeline and motives of the incident. Particular attention was paid to Kevin's messages, in which he repeatedly mentioned his fear of exposure and the impossibility of escape from the situation. On the evening of October 17, 2003, the Holden family home was cordoned off by police. An initial examination of the crime scene was conducted in the presence of a forensic expert and forensic experts. Numerous biological traces, signs of a struggle, and personal belongings of the deceased and the accused were discovered in the room where the murder occurred. Detectives were particularly interested in a torn photograph depicting both brothers at approximately 10 years of age. Immediately after James's body was discovered, Kevin was taken to the police station. For the first few hours, he was in a state of profound nervous shock, answering questions incoherently and not always understanding what was happening. The on-duty psychiatrist concluded that Kevin required medical attention and was prescribed short-term therapy to stabilize his condition. Police continued to work at the crime scene throughout the night. Forensic experts documented traces of blood, abrasions, and bruises on James's body, as well as microscopic particles of Kevin's skin and hair on the deceased's hands and clothing. Cell phones, James's personal computer, several notebooks, and diaries were seized. The materials were sent to a lab for further analysis. On the morning of October 18th, questioning of family members and immediate neighbors began. Arthur and Julia Holden gave similar testimony. Their relationship with their sons had noticeably deteriorated over the past 6 months, but they had not suspected any danger or threat. The parents noted James's isolation and Kevin's frequent mood swings. Neighbors recalled occasional arguments and odd behavior in the brothers, but they had not observed anything criminal. During interviews with Kevin's classmates, investigators discovered that in the last year before the tragedy, he began to withdraw from social interactions, skipped classes, and often appeared tired. Some school friends suggested Kevin was depressed, but could not pinpoint the specific reasons for his condition. Importantly, none of those interviewed knew the nature of the relationship between the brothers. An autopsy confirmed that James's death was caused by asphyxia caused by mechanical strangulation. Signs of a struggle were found on his body, abrasions on his neck, bruises on his arms and torso, indicating resistance. Tissue and biological traces were also found in the room, indicating an intense struggle. Analysis of the contents of mobile devices and a computer allowed the recovery of a significant portion of the correspondence between the brothers. The messages contained numerous hints of secrets, secrecy, anxiety, and a desire to start over. One of the messages contained phrases suggesting an intimate relationship, which became the subject of a separate investigation. In James's personal diaries, experts discovered entries devoted to his relationship with his brother, his inner struggles, his feelings of guilt, and his constant fear of exposure. This information formed the basis for a psychological evaluation conducted by specialists at a Minnesota clinic. The experts concluded that the brothers had a complex system of dependency, exacerbated by isolation and family tension. In the week following the tragedy, Kevin underwent several interviews in the presence of his lawyer and psychiatrist. Initially, he denied premeditation, claiming it had happened accidentally during an argument. However, an analysis of his testimony revealed numerous inconsistencies. The timing of the crime, the sequence of events, and the details of the struggle varied in different versions of his story. Kevin later admitted that he feared their relationship would be exposed, and it was this fear that triggered the conflict. Police thoroughly examined the Holden family's daily routine, verified their parents' alibis, and interviewed everyone who might have had contact with the brothers in recent weeks. It turned out the brothers had virtually no outside connections, spending all their free time together or alone. Even their school teachers were unaware of what was going on in the family. The investigation focused on analyzing Kevin's behavior after the incident. From the moment the crime was committed until the police arrived, he made no attempt to escape, did not attempt to destroy evidence, and even called emergency services himself. Psychologists interpreted this as a sign of extreme stress and an inability to consciously respond to what was happening. A torn photograph found at the crime scene became a crucial piece of evidence. Experts restored it and determined that the photo was taken approximately 7 years before the tragedy. During a family trip to a lake, investigators believed the photograph may have had symbolic significance, but no direct evidence was found. As part of the investigation, additional tests were conducted: genetic, forensic, and psychiatric. The results confirmed that the brothers had a complex addiction, and their relationship was hidden and traumatic. The investigation concluded that both had suicidal tendencies, indirectly confirmed by the diary entries found. A month after the tragedy, the case materials were transferred to the prosecutor's office for the preparation of an indictment. The police completed the investigation, documenting all the circumstances of the crime, details of the suspect's behavior, and associated psychological factors. Kevin Holden's trial began in February 2004 in St. Paul County Court. The hearings were held behind closed doors, with both parties, expert witnesses, and guardianship representatives present. The investigative materials presented by the prosecutor included expert examination results, interrogation notes, the brothers' correspondence, and personal diaries. A prominent feature of the trial were the reports of forensic psychiatrists who confirmed Kevin exhibited symptoms of severe emotional distress and suicidal tendencies. Testimony from family members, neighbors, school teachers, and psychologists was heard at the hearing. Kevin's parents insisted they were unaware of the nature of the relationship between their sons and did not notice any signs of danger. The defendant did not deny the murder, but stated that he had not intended to take his brother's life and had acted in a state of passion. The court considered psychiatrists' testimony regarding Kevin's mental state at the time of the crime. The defense emphasized the prolonged psychological pressure, secrecy, and lack of adult support. The prosecutor insisted the defendant's actions were premeditated, but acknowledged that his motives were related to the threat of disclosure of family secrets and a psychological breakdown. The court found Kevin Holden guilty of aggravated murder, but the sentence was reduced due to his insanity. He was sentenced to a lengthy stay in a specialized medical facility for psychiatric treatment and further rehabilitation. After the trial, the Holden family moved to another state, declining any public comment. The Holden brothers' case became one of the most secretive and controversial in the region's history, sparking widespread public outcry among local residents and experts. Following the investigation, individual episodes of the case were used in training manuals for family and adolescent psychology specialists. Court documents were partially sealed by order to protect the family's interests and prevent public pressure on the remaining members.